Imagine you are standing in New York City. You're going about your day, coffee in hand, nothing unusual. Then, without warning, a fireball appears on the horizon. Not a small fire. A fireball 5 miles wide, taller than Mount Everest, brighter than the sun. You're 1,000 miles away. It does not matter. The shockwave reaches you anyway. Windows shatter, buildings tremble, people fall to the ground, not knowing what happened, not knowing if it will stop. This was not a nightmare. This was not a movie. This happened on October 30th, 1961, in the Arctic, and the people who built it were terrified of what they had created. This is the story of Tsar Bomba, the largest weapon ever detonated in human history, and the men who almost did not survive testing it. Let's go back to 1954. The Cold War is in full swing, and both the United States and the Soviet Union are locked in the most dangerous arms race in history. Not an arms race with guns or tanks, an arms race measured in megatons, the destructive power of millions of tons of TNT. The Americans had tested bigger and bigger bombs. The Soviets had fallen behind, and Nikita Khrushchev, the Soviet premier, had a very simple solution to falling behind: build something so big that nobody would ever question Soviet power again. He called his top scientists into a room and said, in effect, "I don't care about the physics. I don't care about the practicalities. I want the biggest bomb ever built. Build it." The man who had to actually do this was Andrei Sakharov. Remember that name. Sakharov was arguably the most brilliant nuclear physicist in the Soviet Union, a man so respected that even government officials spoke carefully around him. He was also, quietly, beginning to have serious doubts about what he was building. But in 1954, those doubts were still quiet. So he got to work. The original design called for a bomb yielding 100 megatons. Let that number sit for a moment. 100 megatons. That is 4,000 times the power of the bomb that destroyed Hiroshima. 4,000 times. Even Sakharov thought this was too much fallout, too much radiation poisoning the atmosphere, too dangerous not just for the enemy, but for the entire planet. They scaled it back to 50 megatons. 50 megatons was still the most powerful weapon ever built by human beings. Now, how do you test a bomb this size? This was a genuinely difficult problem. The bomb itself weighed 27,000 pounds. It was 26 feet long. It was so large it could not fit inside any existing Soviet bomber. Engineers had to modify a specially built Tupolev Tu-95 aircraft, removing the bomb bay doors entirely and designing a custom cradle just to carry the device. And here is the part that should make you very uncomfortable. The scientists calculated that when the bomb detonated, even at the planned altitude of 4 kilometers, the blast wave would be powerful enough to destroy the aircraft that dropped it. The crew of that plane knew this. They were told their chance of survival was approximately 50%. They flew anyway. October 30th, 1961. The Arctic archipelago of Novaya Zemlya, a place so remote it barely exists on most maps. The Tu-95 carrying Tsar Bomba took off at 8:22 a.m., accompanied by a second observation aircraft. Both planes had been painted white, a special reflective coating designed to deflect heat from the blast. The crew had parachutes. They had been briefed. They had said goodbye to people they loved. At 11:32 a.m., at an altitude of 10,500 meters, Tsar Bomba was released. It fell for 188 seconds, slowed deliberately by enormous parachutes to give the aircraft time to escape. Then it detonated. What happened next defies normal description. The fireball was 5 miles in diameter. It reached nearly 7 miles into the atmosphere, punching past the stratosphere into space's edge. The thermal pulse, the wave of pure heat, was felt by observers over 170 miles away. The shock wave circled the Earth not once, not twice, 3 times. The seismic wave registered as a magnitude 5 earthquake. Windows were broken in Norway and Finland. Countries that had nothing to do with the test, countries not even close to the detonation point. A village called Severny, not far from Ground Zero, was simply erased. Every building, every structure, gone. And the pilots? The Tu-95 had managed to fly approximately 45 kilometers from the detonation point when the bomb went off. The shockwave hit the plane so hard, it dropped almost 1 kilometer before the pilots regained control. They survived, barely. The pilot, Major Andrei Durnovtsev, was later awarded the Hero of the Soviet Union, the highest military honor in the USSR. When he landed, he reportedly could not speak for several minutes. Now, here is the part of the story that almost never gets told. Andrei Sakharov, the man who designed Tsar Bomba, watched the test from a remote location, and something broke in him. Not the bomb, him. In his memoirs, he described the experience as a turning point. The moment he understood, physically and emotionally, what it meant to have created something this powerful. The mushroom cloud, the silence that followed, the sheer scale of what human beings were capable of doing to each other. From that day forward, Sakharov began a quiet, then increasingly public campaign against nuclear weapons testing. He wrote letters. He argued with officials. He put his career, his freedom, and eventually his safety at risk. He became, and this is not an exaggeration, one of the most important anti-nuclear voices of the 20th century. The man who built the biggest bomb in history spent the rest of his life trying to make sure nothing like it would ever be used. In 1975, he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. The Soviet government would not allow him to leave the country to accept it. So what was Tsar Bomba's legacy? The bomb was never deployed. It was never loaded onto a missile. It was never used in combat. In a strange way, it was too powerful to be useful. A weapon designed to intimidate ended up mostly intimidating the people who built it, but it changed the world anyway. The test accelerated negotiations that led to the Partial Nuclear Test Ban Treaty of 1963, an agreement between the US, USSR, and UK to stop testing nuclear weapons in the atmosphere, in space, and underwater. The sky above us is cleaner because of what happened over Novaya Zemlya on October 30th, 1961. Not because anyone was noble, because everyone was scared. Tsar Bomba was detonated once. It was never detonated again. Its casing sits today in a museum in Sakharov, Russia, a city that does not appear on most Russian maps because it is still a closed nuclear research facility. You can look at photographs of it online, a large gray cylinder, modest-looking almost. Nothing about its appearance suggests what it did. 50 megatons, the shockwave that circled the Earth 3 times, the pilot who could not speak when he landed, the scientist who spent the rest of his life in regret. The biggest explosion in human history, built to end a war that never came, and haunting us still. If this is the kind of story you didn't learn in school, subscribe. There's a new case file every week, and some of them are even stranger than this one.